Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in the Twin Cities, it's time for Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
And hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Radio. I'm John Ray, and folks, this is going to be a good one. A guest that I'm hoping will be able to get her to come out of her shell. Lisa J. Smith. She is with Smith Company, or Smith Co. for short. Lisa, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, John. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you, and thanks for letting me joke around with you a little bit.
Sure.
But let's get straight into it. Let's talk about you and how you're serving folks out there at Smith Co.
Awesome. Well, so I'm the CEO of Smith Company, and we launched last year. We are a sales consulting firm, primarily targeting the B2B sector. And I consider myself, after 30 years of doing this, a brilliant sales strategist and a sales culture cultivator. So we'll talk about that later today. So I'm very excited to dive in.
I love it. So, B2B is your sweet spot. You know, why are B2B sales so hard for so many companies?
Yeah, great question. So, most B2B businesses, what do we mean by that? People who sell basically their time and their services and their knowledge, and it varies, right? It could be CPAs, it could be attorneys, it could be engineers, it could be advertising agencies, architects. It runs the gamut. I think the reason why it's so hard, especially now in kind of post-pandemic, if we can say post, is because you're really good at what you do. You've been trained to do something very specific, very complex. You may even need extra licensure and things like that. And then you start a business, you start growing a business, it's super excited. And that starts to take you away from what you're really good at, right? So what you're really good at is doing the work. And running a business means you have to wear all the hats at the same time if you're an entrepreneur until you get to the point where you can hand those hats off. And I think that why B2B sales is so hard is because we are in a relationship-based organization. You're selling knowledge in a long tail sales cycle. And so reaching those key decision makers, and often the group of decision makers, often it's a team of people making those decisions, can be very challenging. Everyone is super busy. Everyone is being bombarded with information from 100 different channels. And so trying to differentiate yourself as a micro or small B2B organization in all the blah, blah, blah is really challenging. Then when you can bust through, it's really trying to build an authentic relationship with those decision makers or influencers. And I think that's why it's so hard.
I think we just need to go straight to let's get folks in touch with Lisa after that, because you're right. You described something, a whole, quite a formidable set of obstacles that folks run into here. And one of the things that I really want to highlight, and folks, you'll see this in the show notes, but one of the things you mentioned in your company description is that the B2B sector has seen some of the biggest shifts in client behavior, shifting work styles, and accelerating digital demand. That stood out for me. Let's talk about those three things and what's changed there.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. So the traditional way a B2B business would conduct sales, would be, again, highly relationship-based in a pre-COVID environment. They would be going to trade shows. They would be having one-on-one meetings. They would be doing high-touch, high in-person types of activities. And they typically did not rely on their digital presence because there wasn't a need to do that, right? They may have had the bona fides on a website and, your standard sort of maybe a virtual brochure, if you will, but they really were not thinking about or relying on that environment. And then the pandemic hit and no one was meeting with anyone else. And literally overnight, the traditional sales vehicles that most of these small to medium-sized businesses were doing disappeared. And on top of it, they didn't have a digital presence. They weren't relying on digital tools, digital insights to start selling. And so literally they had to shift. And some industries were still doing really well during the pandemic. And so we haven't seen as many shifts to creating a digital presence or leveraging those digital tools. And some industries dove in, but then they were inundated with choices. What do I do? How do I do it? How do I reach individuals? Where are they? Where did they go? Because the client behavior shifted. So now in a long tail sale, because there is so much information online, many key C-suite, VP decision makers are doing 80% of their research online before they even talk to an individual. So now you're paired with this real dichotomy. You have individuals who maybe were not online or were online but weren't really leveraging their messaging or call to action or trying to pull them into their sales funnel. And then you have clients who are now like, well, I can't speak to individuals. I want to do all the research, myself. For example, Gartner posted a research study they did early in the spring, and it said that most for a very large investment, for a very large sale, most clients will now wait. And even if it causes them pain in their business, they will wait and delay to make a decision in order to avoid making the wrong decision because there's so much at stake. So, trying to reach these individuals, trying to penetrate, and getting aligned and learning all the new tools that we had to was truly a challenge. And then on top of that, people weren't in their office. So now all of a sudden people are working everywhere, right? So even as one-on-one meetings are starting just now to come back online, people are anxious to meet with people again, but they may not be in that traditional environment where someone is used to pulling out a laptop and doing a pitch, or, using the traditional tools they would be, because there may be, they're meeting at a bar or they're meeting at someone's patio, so literally everything related to the sales cycle completely flipped on its head. And some businesses did an incredible job, following that transition and innovating, and some are continuing to lag. And that's just kind of based on culture and leadership.
Wow. A lot there, Lisa. That was awesome. And there's one particular part of that stood out for me, and that the Gartner study that you mentioned, and how the fear of making a wrong decision, how powerful that is, and what that means for a B2B sales organization. What that really means is sometimes your biggest competitor is inaction. Mm-hmm. Right? Not
Absolutely.
Doing anything.
Yep.
How do you address that specifically?
Well, interestingly enough, I totally believe in this philosophy, but that study goes on to say that B2B sales has now changed from being sort of a knowledge provider and a teacher. So we talked about thought leadership. We've been talking about that for many years, and, trying to really make sure that you're presenting enough information so the client can answer any questions they have. Now, what that Gartner study is starting to say to fight this idea of inaction is we need to be sense makers. We need to help our clients, because they're doing so much independent research, actually sift and winnow through all of that. So if we can approach them and say, we can help you try to make sense of all this information, because not everything is apples to apples. Mm-hmm. That helps you develop this really high quality relationship, so that when they are ready to make a decision, it's like, okay, not only do they understand my business, maybe a little bit better than I do, not only do they understand their competitors and who's out there and why they're different, I think that they're a better choice, because they're going to help continue, for me as a client, help me continue to make complex decisions down the road. So it's like taking it one step further and saying, I'm not just going to provide information. We're going to talk about the value of all the information that you've received and how to make the right decisions so that you can fight this idea of inaction.
Great words from Lisa J. Smith. She is with Smith Company, is the founder and CEO of Smith Company. Lisa, let's talk a little bit about analysis paralysis.
Right.
You've got a lot to say about that.
I do. And it's real, right? So I think that there's so much data out there now. And in micro to small, even medium-sized businesses, there's two things I think relate to analysis paralysis. First, it's, I don't have any data. I don't have any. I'm not collecting any data, right? So you're paralyzed by the fact that you feel like you don't have any, which is completely untrue. As a business, you're collecting data all the time. You have information, no matter how informal it is. It doesn't have to be in a sophisticated database. You know who your clients are, what they're buying, how frequently they buy, how often they buy. You know what markets you're serving. You know what services are most successful. There's a lot, who are your biggest clients and who are your smallest clients. So you know a lot of information. And I think sometimes small to micro to small businesses say, I don't have enough data or I don't have any data to give me the insights that I need. And so when I work with them, what I say is, we're not going to go out and invent data. Let's just look at what you have, because there are key nuggets and insights to what you're tracking. It doesn't even matter if it's on a simple spreadsheet, right? It doesn't matter the format that the data is in. There's a lot there that we can mine. So that's kind of one layer of analysis paralysis. I don't have enough, or I have none. Then the other analysis paralysis is that I have too much. I'm collecting it from so many resources. They're all siloed. None of them are talking to each other. And so I don't even know what to do with all this information. I've got Google Analytics on my website, and I've got some automated data. I'm doing some, information. Maybe they're doing some campaigns. I've got a CRM. I've got, a customer relationship management software. I've got, my own financial information, whether it's QuickBooks or using a different tool. And none of those tools talk to each other. I've got social media. I'm posting on LinkedIn. I don't even know what some of these things mean. And so again, we start from where you are day one, and we sift and winnow and start connecting the dots. So the thing is, it's again this idea, John, interestingly enough, of inaction. If you do one thing, if you start with really small steps, often those garner the greatest insights on how to move forward, particularly when you're trying to grow your business. It's less about the big moves. And then it's about connecting the dots. And I have it as an organization, as running my own business. So it's a human trait to say, I don't have enough, or I have too little. So, it's really about just asking the right questions and starting a dialogue to say, trust me, you're okay. We're going to work this out together.
Is part of this just looking for perfection when we shouldn't look for perfection?
Oh, I totally think that. And everyone has a fear of failure.
Right.
I mean, no one wants to fail, right? And I don't even know what failure means anymore, especially after all we've been through in the past 18 months. What does that even mean? Right. So I think it's this fear of, I'm going to do something wrong. I'm going to have a misstep. I just don't want to, I don't want to be wrong. And so then people do nothing. And that's a kiss of death. Doing nothing is the kiss of death. Yeah,
for sure. Now, Lisa, let's talk about what I know I hear from a lot of business owners, and you obviously do as well. Why can't I find individuals that can sell like I do? How do I find that? How do I find someone that's as passionate about my business as I am? Address that question.
That is a great question. And they do struggle. They do struggle with that. And I think it's interesting now. We're seeing a lot of business owners who are thinking about transitioning, and they're really grappling with this question. I don't feel like and it's for all the right reasons. Their heart is in the right place. I don't feel like my partners or my managers are where I'm at, and I'm thinking about retiring or selling off a piece of my business. What do I do? And often I think that, especially that first generation, the business is your personality. The business is you. You are the impetus of that, no matter how for example, I'm working with an engineering company right now, headquartered out of the Chicagoland area. There's 3 partners, and they're still relatively young, but they're starting to think about what they do. But the business has always been in their mind about the 3 partners. And now they're 35 individuals, right? So the key is, I think first in admitting that no one is going to be like you are, right? You're the one that founded the organization, and you grew the organization, and you added people who were not like you because they had different and valuable skills as well. I think the key is trying to understand and translate whatever that special sauce is, right? So how would you say, as an owner, I asked the question, how would you define your special sauce? What is it that you think you do better than anybody else? And quite often, personality is some of it, but quite often it's really about the way they discuss their business, right? And everyone has a different layer of passion, but I think selling is really just understanding the process, understanding how to ask questions, understanding how to be prepared, and then adding your own personality to that. And I think that once owners understand that, there are certain aspects of the secret sauce that they can translate, then we start to train other individuals, and they start to build confidence that, oh, they can do this. I never thought about it, translating in this way. But the other thing that is I do when cultivating a sales culture and trying to attack this, like I can't find people who do it the way I do, is you have to make sales, the sales process, part of everyone's everyday job, right? So even if they're an engineer, or if they're an art director at an advertising agency, or maybe they're an architect, if you are able to start to take the sales process and translate it into their everyday activities, then selling becomes second nature. And even many business owners, selling is not their second nature. It's what they've done over time because they had to grow their business, right? And so I think we start translating that to their culture and to people. And as soon as an owner starts to see success from other individuals, then they say, oh, okay, this is going to be okay. We're going to be able to make a transition. But it is a process, and it does take some investment to say, we need to train up. And sometimes it takes a lot of work to get an owner to say what their secret sauce is, right?
Right.
To help them with that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned a key word there, and that's personality. And, I was having fun with you about you coming out of your shell. And I think what that gets to, is, some business owners, particularly in B2B, right? Because it's high intellect, and a lot of times that means introversion sometimes,
yes,
right?
It does.
And so I think our introverts think, I can't be good at sales because I'm introverted.
Right.
And I think you've got some great thoughts on that.
I do. It's funny because there's actually more introverts than there are extroverts. And we need introverts in our, not only societally, I think we need that, but we need it in business. Because I think in business to business, to your point, because we're talking about really high level complex ideas, maybe they're going pretty fast. Maybe these conversations are running at a pretty fast pace. But I think sometimes because people are introverted, they feel like selling means you need to be on. You need to have a larger than life personality. But in business to business, it's often the most thoughtful individuals who are asking really great questions that are the most successful. So I think it's perception. And in this instance, perception, they say perception is often reality, but I think the perception about I'm introverted, therefore I can't sell is really wrong. I think they are often best at selling in a complex sales environment. And I think when I'm working with organizations, particularly like I'm going to pick on my engineering folks, when I'm working with them, what I often tell them is that you need to be authentic. And I think that most individuals read authenticity first. I think it's a human emotional intelligence, right? They can, especially the younger generations, if you talk about demographics, they know immediately when someone is being inauthentic. And that larger than life personality can come off as being inauthentic. And so I actually think it's about shifting perception. And many people, yes, are you going to have to do something that you may feel is not second nature? Having a conversation, with someone. Often introverts are better one-on-one, which, to be honest, works better in a B&B sales environment. So it's not about throwing them into a public speaking event, right? It's not about that. They're probably not better for that. They'll have to find someone, or they're going to have to train up to do that. But I think it's about shifting perception, and allowing them to understand that their strength, which is perceived as a weakness, is actually what will win them the most work.
And you mentioned something there that it seems to me is really important, and that is the ability to think in terms of where the client is and ask great questions, and having that natural ability, if you're more introverted, is so valuable. And talk about that and having the client's mindset, if you will, in selling.
Yeah, that takes a little bit of training. I'll be honest with you. It does take trial and error. Even if you've been in an industry for a long time, because as you know, industries evolve, organizations evolve, people within those organizations are evolving. And I think you can start with, what I always do is I start with giving people good, solid, open-ended questions, because it's always easier to ask an open-ended question and then allow somebody to talk. Because in a one, or let's say you're meeting with 2 or 3 people, most people would prefer to talk about themselves, not ask you a bunch of questions. So, and again, this is where introverts are really good, because then you're listening. So I think you start with a base of just really great open-ended questions. It's like, for example, what are you seeing in the industry right now, that's different than you saw 12 months ago? A completely open-ended question. And then what I try to do, if you're not used to doing this, is as you're listening in your head, you're starting to say, oh, I heard something, almost like you're doing in this interview. I heard something really interesting that I want to ask a follow-up question on that will allow me to sell my business, to differentiate myself. And that's where the trial and error comes in. That's where you're having a one-on-one with somebody, and they say something, you're like, you said something really interesting there. I would love to have a follow-up question. And then you start to insert yourself. And I think people who are really great at listening, and that's a skill in and of itself, and asking open-ended questions, start to combat that. But I'm not going to lie, it takes some experience, right? And that's why you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable for a little bit, and you have to be comfortable with not always knowing the answer, because clients are going to expect you to be on. And what I learned very early on as a young designer is, if I didn't know the answer to the question, I said, you know what? That's a great question. I don't actually have an answer for you. What I'm going to do is find out and get back to you. And that is more valuable than trying to riff off the fly and answer something, because people know clients will know you don't know, right?
Sure. Wow. Folks, thousands of dollars of advice here, for free, folks, from Lisa J. Smith, and she's with Smith Company. She's the founder CEO of Smith Company. So I want to get into some of the specifics of how you work with clients in just a second. But let's talk about business development tactics. We've talked a lot about strategies and kind of big picture things, but let's talk about some tactics, because I want to get some work today. So how do I talk to me about some tactics I can implement today, Lisa?
All right. Absolutely. So I think for micro and small businesses, what's so complicated to sift and winnow through when you need sales now, to your point, John, is there are all of these options and all of these tools, and they have no idea what to do first or what to do in combination. So where I always start is LinkedIn. And it may sound trite, but in business to business, the easiest way to start building your brand with the people you're targeting is to just start posting information about who you are and what your company does on LinkedIn. You don't have to buy advertising. You don't have to buy, do a lot of paid search. The other thing that I would do is I would make sure that your business has a Google business listing. It's free. Just go on Google Business and make sure you have so that when people are searching for you, and again, you're not buying paid search, there's a lot of text that you can do for advertising, quote unquote. That way you show up. You're giving Google the information to allow people when they're looking for you to show up, which is most important, right? Because you can't be everywhere. So you want to try to create a presence. So then if we're working together, let's say that business is already doing those things, we want to enhance that. So then what I would say is you really want to start thinking about how much content that you have. And if you're really leveraging your content across all the platforms, are you posting on LinkedIn and then absolutely, reposting that on your website so that you're building traffic? And are you asking for the business? Do you have a call to action? A lot of people, especially here in the Midwest, we're really reticent to ask for the business. If you're meeting with someone and you have a good rapport, absolutely ask for that business. Absolutely get a follow-up meeting. Because if you walk away from that, there's no guarantee they're going to have time later, even if they like you, because they're busy, they have an agenda, they're trying to get doing something. So ask for the next step. As soon as you start, know how you're going to end. Those are some of the really low-hanging fruit, easy things I can say to say you need to get out there now. And when you start posting information on yourself, people are getting to know you as an organization. Then as they're doing that research, they're coming to you with information. So they're going to ask you better questions about how you can help them.
Love it. Wow. Lots of great stuff there, folks. So let's get to how you work with clients, and maybe the way to start this part of our discussion is talk about how a conversation with you unfolds. I mean, if someone hears this, they want to get in touch. How does a conversation unfold, and how are you digging into what their issues are?
Great. So I start by asking a lot of questions. Yeah, absolutely. So if someone were to call me and say, "Hey, I heard you on this podcast," I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. What business sector are you in?" And then I'm going to ask a lot of questions. So obviously it's about trying to dig in to find their obstacles and their pain. I want to know my hashtag is get unstuck. Where do they feel stuck? So I'm going to start asking a lot of questions. Is it sales? Is it growth? Is it the services? Is it their staff? Is it their culture? Where are they? Where do they find that they're struggling? And often what we initially talk about are symptoms to the problem, and we have to dig in a little bit deeper to actually get to the actual source of the problem. And sometimes that takes data analysis. So if people like what they hear, and they want more, then what I do is I can tell immediately if they're going to need strategy or they're going to need tactics. Are they going to need execution right away to help them meet their sticking point? Or do they need to back up and create a plan to then get to the tactics? So then I have two sort of platforms that I serve. I can either create a strategic plan, and that can be very bare bones. I'm trying to use the data you have. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. But, what is the bigger picture? Like, do you even know what the customer journey looks like? Do you know about where they're getting stuck with you? Are you trying to increase the share of wallet, right? Are you trying to focus more? Often B2B focuses on acquisition when they really should focus on referrals and retention, because that's where the easiest low-hanging fruit is, right? Continuing to do business with people who you're already doing business with. So we talk through that. And if I find that they're getting stuck there, I say, okay, let's do a quick business model. Let's do some strategy. Then that'll point to where you need to go. And that could be the tactical piece, which is either A, you go do that. I'm going to give you the foundation and you can go execute that. Or B, we work together and be tactical. And I have sort of 3 layers in the subscription service where I help with the hardest part. It's qualified leads. No one likes to prospect. No one wants to pick up the phone and cold call, right? No one wants to do that. I don't want to do that.
Right.
I want to have conversations with people who are interested in me and I'm interested in them.
Mm-hmm.
So I peel off the hardest parts, and a small to medium-sized business can shoot that to me, and I will do that. They outsource it. So I can work with tools in a subscription-based monthly model that says, okay, I'm going to give you qualified leads. The second tier is I'm going to get you qualified leads, and I'm going to start warming those leads up for you. Or you can actually, if you don't have time, I can actually do some of the selling for you. I can build those referrals, those qualified referrals for you. Because a qualified lead is not, hey, I heard about you. A qualified referral is not, hey, I'm on the golf course with Tom, and I think, Tina really would love to work with you. That's not qualified. Qualified is they're ready to buy now. They're so engaged and interested that they want to close that sale now. So 2 ways of working with an organization, but it always starts with a dialogue to try to find out, like, where do we need to focus? I can hear just from experience where their pain is. Okay, let's that's sticky. Let's go and get that unstuck.
Now, I think what I heard there is that you're both depending on the individual situation of the client, that you can act as either sales coach to a business owner that is doing the selling themselves, or you can actually be the fractional sales officer, chief revenue officer, if you will, of a company.
Absolutely.
Either one.
Absolutely.
Either one.
Right. Yep. And it really depends on the need and the culture of that organization.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just want to boost sales and they can close all day long, right? Some people don't want to even close. They just want to do the great work. They want to run the business. And so that's why I built a model to be, I'm not going to say all things to all people, but it's about meeting the need, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, let's get to a situation where your work has been particularly transformational, a success story. You obviously don't have to share names, but a success story that you feel particularly proud of that you like to share.
I have a great one,
okay.
Which is probably the toughest thing. It's actually about my own career, an opportunity that happened within my own career. The toughest thing I ever did. So I have a very non-traditional career. As an entrepreneur, I've been entrepreneurial my whole life. And so I decided to do a traditional sales position on commission. Now, I had been salaried my entire career. I'd never done this before. I'd never been in a traditional sales position. And when I joined this organization, it was B2B. When I joined this organization, I literally had to build the book of business from scratch. So not only was I'm pretty good at sales, but I'd never been, the pressure and the thought of being, no salary. It's not as, I'm not going to get paid every, I got to, what do they say? Eat what you kill. Like, this is literally what in that situation. And so I started out and I learned more about what to do and what not to do. Talk about failing fast. And so I feel confident when I coach companies because I've literally walked the walk. I've lived all the pain. And that idea, when I was working an agenda, if I'd walk into a room and I was like feeling desperate, right? I felt the pressure. It rolls off you. People it was almost like parting of the Red Sea. I could tell in a room that people didn't want to talk to me because they could sense how desperate I was to close the sale. So I had to really mentally shift and say, stop working an agenda. Just start, as I'm building this book of business, just start asking great questions and getting to know people, understanding their need and having a conversation, and the sales will come. And it was a Herculean effort for me to do that personally. But after a year, I was able to build a book of business from scratch, and I closed $2 million worth of sales. So it can be done. It can be done. It took a lot of hard work and a lot of lessons, but I can say that it's doing the opposite of what you think you should be doing. It's not working an agenda. It's not handing out brochures. It's not doing all the things that you associate with sales if you've never done it before. And so I think the reason why I feel confident in running my business now is that I can't say I've seen everything, but I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot, and I've seen a lot of things go wrong, and I've personally been on the line. So I would never ask a client to try to do something that I don't think that I could do myself.
Wow. That's awesome. Lisa J. Smith, founder, CEO of the Smith Company. Wow, this has been great, Lisa, and what a lot of great advice and help that you've brought to folks that are listening. I can't imagine there aren't some folks that want to be in touch with you after hearing what you've had to share, and they might want to dig deeper, have you dig deeper into their situation. Let's give them coordinates. How do they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So first, please always email me, ljsmith@smithcous.com. So that's smithcous, all one word.com. Or you can go to my website, smithcous.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. Both companies on LinkedIn. I am always available to ask questions. And because I'm in a consultative business, I'm not going to start, until we have an agreement, we're going to have a conversation. We're just going to get to know each other. So never worry about being nickeled and dimed. But I would love for you to contact me because I think we can identify some sticking points quite quickly.
Awesome. Lisa J. Smith, Smith Company. Thanks so much for being with us, Lisa.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks so much. Folks, just a quick reminder that you can find the show. Probably the easiest URL is minnesotabusinessradio.com. You can find the show there and our complete archive of shows. Here's what my bold ask of you is. I would love it on behalf of our guest. It's not about me. It's not about Business RadioX. It's about our guest, like Lisa, who do great work and deserve to be found by folks that need their services. Go to your favorite podcast app, subscribe to the show, and the search term is Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Radio. You'll easily find us on all the major podcast apps. Subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Not 3, not 4, but 5 stars, please, because it helps people, helps people find the show so they can find Lisa and some of the great guests that we've had on this show here over time, and we would really appreciate it if you could do that for us. If you want to get in touch with me directly, you can email me at jray@businessradiox.com. Would love to hear from you and get your feedback on the show. And if you want to find any of our other shows on the Business Radio X network, you can go to businessradiox.com and find our complete shows across our national network. So for my guest, Lisa J. Smith, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Radio.